that for now. So
no,
this principle,
we can do that.
yeah, absolutely, it's relevant.
Yeah.
So this principle of iron, when the African looked at, when we get this iron ore from the ground, it's just a kind of scraggly looking piece of rock.
Right.
But what can we do with this rock? We can mold it. We can turn it into many things. We can turn it into jewelry. Yeah, we can turn it into cooking pots. So the principle of Ogun, I know some people like to equate it with Mercury from the Greek pantheon, saying that Ogun is just the god of iron, or sorry, the god of war. Absolutely not. Ogun is a principle of transformation.
Right. Go on.
Sorry. Go ahead.
To touch on the transformation. So, scientifically, all energy does is transform from one form to another form. And people ask me many times about, do I believe in reincarnation? And it's my belief that everything has always already existed in one way, shape, or form, because that's all everything ever does.
Absolutely. No, you're 100% right. And this is what this principle of Ogun is alluding to. Because even as a human being, do we not go through stages in our life? 1 minute you're just lying there for God knows how many months. Then you start to crawl. You've entered another stage of your life now, yeah? And then the next minute you're walking. Right. So you're constantly transforming. You understand? So the principle of Ogun is not some being standing in the sky somewhere with a big hammer ready to just kind of knock out iron. Also about you and your potential, your abilities. Right. I'll give you another expression which becomes relevant. Water. Yeah. In the Yoruba pantheon, you have this idea of Yemanja, or they call her sometimes the mother of the fishes. Okay. Yes. Now, when you look at Yemanja again, you could easily fall into the trap and say, oh yeah, these ideas are the same as angels or jinns in this tradition or the other. No. Yemanja now, as a principle, feeds back. First, scientifically, the human body is what percentage of water? Over 70%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Yemanja is not separate to me. The human body is also an extension. Absolutely. Right. So just because she might be depicted as a woman doesn't mean you don't have that principle within you. Of course you do.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So let's say, for instance, when the moon goes full and the water tides rise, a lot of people, whether they're aware of it or not, you actually come into a high energy moment where there's a lot of information just available to you from nature. But if you first have to kind of understand how you make yourself available to that information. Yeah. So I may be a man and I'm not a woman, but that principle of Yemanja doesn't just apply to women, because my body makeup reflects that same principle.
That same principle.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go into God being your oldest ancestor.
Is actually, when we came upon it in the research, when something is so simple and obvious, you think, why didn't I ever think of this before? So Sarah has a mom and a dad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they also have what? Mom and dad. Now, when we keep going back and back and back as far as we can, Sarah, where will we end up at? We'll end up at that first stage of manifestation, will we not?
Manifestation, transformation, yes.
So if we trace our family lineages as far back as we possibly could, we will realize that we're only here because of that source. So we're directly related to that source.
Right.
Yes. So this is where the principle of God being your oldest ancestor comes from.
So your genetics, your literal genetics of yourself and the earth are literally God's manifestation of its genetics. To put it simpler.
To put it simply and succinctly, you did a very good job there. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So you are an expression of God. I am an expression of the Creator too, because we all come from that same source. So
That's right.
we'll get into epigenetics later. But yeah, as you correctly said, in your genes, you carry the God gene.
Yeah, because like there are many there's Abrahamic systems that separate themselves from God. And
That's right.
and I said, and I've had debates with them many times, and I've said it doesn't make sense to separate yourself from your source of everything. So how can, because how can your source not be your genetics? I don't understand. It doesn't make any logical sense.
Well, you see, Sarah, this is when you start dealing only with the theory of things. The African systems are very functional. They're very practical.
Right.
Okay. And, you know, it's interesting that it's the same Western worldview that once upon a time tried to belittle it. It's actually now the same ones that is proving this fact. So you mentioned the first bit about the genes, the genetics, because again, even when we look in the blood, we find this is not even something anyone needs to believe me on. Just go look in the science. They tell you all human beings now originated from what? One African woman. This is one of our main sources of the genes. So you see, we've come back again to that first idea I told you of the creator being a woman. Because the science is telling you all of our genes comes from one woman. Yeah. So this idea of
the mitochondrial DNA.
Exactly that. Exactly that. So this is why some scholars, and I agree with them when they say we even need to stop calling it maybe African spirituality and call it an African sacred science, because there's so many concepts in there that we're finding in no longer empirical science, because empirical science is, if you want to call it, the basic form of the science, but we now find in the quantum realm of science.
Quantum realm, yes, exactly.
And the first one being the genes that we just discussed. We all have one source, so we're just a trickle down from that source. We're not separate from the source. You know, we have different expressions, but then we're not separate from the source. And if you look at nature, as an example, there's a time for rain, and there's a time for the sun. There's a time for plants to grow. All these things may happen at different times, but they all feed back into what? One ecosystem. They're all intimately bonded.
That's right.
The African concept of this is Ubuntu. They call it Ubuntu. I am because you are. So if there was no Sarah, there can't be me, because we're intimately connected in this cycle of life.
Okay, so then that feeds for me, psychology, that feeds into not a utopia, but when you realize that you are the thing and the thing is you understand.
That's right.
You understand how now to reflect, to respect it. And so
absolutely,
you get different cultures who don't respect nature. And so so for me, what you find is that they haven't quite, I guess, understood that is them and they are it. So if you destroy it, you will now destroy yourself.
100%, which is we're experiencing some of this now in this day and age. Yeah, because we've messed up much of nature for paper that we ourselves make, and then we give the paper value and say it has this value. But then as our resources are now getting scarce, you see the madness that's going on. Yeah, so we're killing ourselves, because most religions rather take the perspective that man has dominion over nature. But if you can see with this virus thing going on around, it's something we can't even see, and we can't even deal with it. Something so minuscule, but it's wreaking the most havoc that the world has seen today. It wasn't some big nuclear bomb. It's something we can't even perceive with the eye. Something which also comes from nature. Yes. So where are all the prophets and the other special people from the religions? They are not dealing with this. It's nature giving us a good being. Because you might argue, we've got to a stage where it's like, okay, you're not learning the lessons here in the scarcity. Let's see what you will do. And we're being forced to change. So nature is all encompassing. Nature is everything. Now, actually, let me also.
Sorry, go on, brother. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, Sarah, because there are three concepts that you find of God in all the Abrahamic religions, if you will. The first one is God is omnipotent, meaning God is all powerful. Yeah. We have this virus